student of philosophy and theology. Cover a lot of movies, geopolitics, do a lot of goofy comedic type of stuff as well, and I do a lot of debates. So I come from a Orthodox Christian perspective. I've been through a few different religious views. I was raised Protestant, got into Roman Catholicism, and then studied a lot of Platonism and Neoplatonism, and then got into Orthodoxy in my 30s. So I'm here to argue in favor of the existence of the triune God, the validity and coherence of the presuppositional argument, and the coherence of the Christian worldview. I think it's the only worldview that really gives a grounding for what we could call a worldview. So that's my position.
All right, and Detroyer, if you could just do the same, just give a short little introduction on what you're about and what you're going to be defending or arguing for tonight.
Sure. I'll just start by saying briefly, thanks for hosting this discussion, and thanks, Jay, for taking it part. I'll just say briefly that I have bachelor's in philosophy, as far as relevant here, and I like engaging with others on philosophical issues and so forth. And in terms of what my views are, religiously, I consider myself agnostic on the existence of God. In this discussion, I'll be taking a sort of opposition stance to his sort of transcendental or presuppositionalist approach to belief in God.
I'm sorry, you cut
beyond
off.
that.
You say you're going to critique the view. Is that what you said? I'm sorry. You cut
Yeah,
off.
it's my position that, at least as far as I can tell, that the view does not convincingly demonstrate the existence of the Christian God or of a God in general. Sorry, let me know if my audio is
You're good.
shit, because
It was me. I was distracted. It wasn't you. I had to
sounds
change
good.
something.
So Jay, if you could lay out just very quickly for a lot of people who don't know what the transcendental argument for God is, just as much detail as you want.
Right. I would state it that if we look at anything that pertains to what we could call a worldview, so anything in the domain of ethics, metaphysics, or epistemology, any of the branches or any area of life, whether it's something like objective ethics or whether it's something like abstract entities, mathematical entities, logic itself, meta-logic, meta-ethic, any of these kinds of topics or things that when we try to make sense of them and to see if they are coherent and to give a grounding for them, we are oftentimes led to, I would argue, transcendental preconditions. In other words, that there are preconditions that are necessary or must be the case for any of the things that I listed to be possible. So we're saying that they are preconditions of possibility at all. And then my addendum to that is that when I look at all the various transcendental categories or presuppositions, and there are different types of transcendental arguments. People make different types of arguments. I'm making a very specific one. I'm going to say that when I list or look at all these different transcendental categories, such as the existence of an external world, such as the existence of a self that is coherent and retains memories and impressions and so forth over time, the space-time perception of an external world, induction, the objectivity of ethics, the invariant nature of immaterial objects like numbers or laws of logic. All of these types of things are absolutely necessary and oftentimes assume or necessarily correlate or imply one another. And so in that regard, I would say that you need a higher level, even higher order transcendental that encompasses and can ground all of the transcendentals themselves. So look at it in a three-tiered way, to where we have the world in front of us, we have the perception of the world, we have experiences in the world, we have meaning for sentences and propositions and so forth. We use logic, etc. Grounding those, we need, I would argue, transcendental categories. And then when I have all these transcendental categories in sort of a bundle, grounding those, we need a personal God, and namely the Trinity that is found in Orthodox Christianity, because that argument, that theism is unique. So there's not another type of theism that can ground, for example, the problem of the one and the many, or they can ground the distinction between creator and creature, and yet at the same time, through the divine energies, have a relationship within, immanent in the created order, and yet at the same time not identical to it. It's the divine mind, for example, that grounds immaterial logical objects like numbers or laws of logic. And so therefore, I'm arguing for a form of divine conceptualism. I'm not arguing for Plato's divine conceptualism, but a form of it, which I would just say is the transcendental argument. So that is my version of the argument.
All right, and also Detroyer, just real quick, while Jay was talking, you had some typing. Maybe if you could turn on push to talk next time.
I was going to ask. I was going to ask if that was audible because I'll turn push to talk on. All right, so I think that was good. Good start. I think maybe if I state what I think the argument is you're trying to make, and see if you can correct me or let me know if this is more or less correct. So you're supposing that there are these truths about the world of, say, causation, induction,
sure,
identity over time, the existence of the external world.
Right.
Those things have necessary preconditions. So there's other things which have to be the case in order for those things to be true. And
right.
At least one of those things is the Christian God, or the Orthodox Christian God.
Well, I'm not saying at least one of those things. I'm saying
the only thing, perhaps. Yeah.
Right. I'm saying that the only thing but when we look at all of the Christian worldview, so it's an argument particularly for not just the existence of God, but also by extension, the rest of the Christian revelation and worldview, that world and that deity makes sense of all of those things, the coherence of the transcendental categories, etc., and that worldview alone. And so other worldviews like Islam or something like that, those are going to be deviations, we would argue, from our worldview. But simply put, yes, that's kind of what I'm saying.
All right. So I assume we'll get to the individual things at some point. But before we get to that, it's not quite clear to me how you get from these things required to have some necessary precondition, which let's just suppose for now. How do you get from that to the necessary precondition is the Orthodox Christian God? And it must be that.
Right, because again, it requires looking at multiple transcendental categories and how they interrelate with one another. For example, the existence of the external world presupposes a self that is experiencing the external world. Now, theoretically, one could say, well, I just deny an external world, or I deny the self. And I would reply by saying at any point that you deny what I would call preconditions, you're immediately put in a position to destroy the possibility of knowledge at all. So if there's no self, then you can't argue your position. You're not even arguing. There's no self. You're not making an argument. So I'm saying that, that external world, for example, presupposes a self. There are assumptions that are necessary for perceiving things in an external world. For example, we perceive things from beginning to middle to end in a four-dimensional spatio-temporal external world. That's another transcendental precondition. It happens within time. I mentioned beginning, middle, end. That is related to the notion of time. I'm not a Kantian, but I think Kant is correct that things like space and time could be considered transcendentally necessary categories, at least as far as we know how to. Sure, absolutely, yeah. Causation, teleology. I would say all of those things are valid examples, and I'm extending the argument saying that I think they also interrelate. It doesn't really make sense to talk about causation without some notion of the external world. I mean, you could think that the external world is all mental or something like that, but there's still a causal relation that's going on. You could think that the external world is, I don't believe this, but I'm just saying that people could come up with all types of conceivable, well, what if I believe in teleology and causation, but I think the whole external world is just a mental phenomena. Okay, but you're still admitting the principle that there are, forces that are involved in causation. There is some notion of purpose that's out there, however you conceive of it. I'm just saying that I do believe that they necessitate and they interrelate with one another, and they presuppose. I would even go a little bit further and say I think they presuppose a specific type of world, namely the world that we experience, right? The commonly experienced external world that we are aware of. that world is the one that I'm arguing for, and it's only really explained in the context of the Christian paradigm as a whole.
Yeah, so I think my question was how you get to that last step, right? So I'm willing to grant, at least for this part of the discussion, right, that all of these things are real. Like, we have to suppose that these things are real, at least, right? The self, the external world, whatever. How do you get from that these things are real, and perhaps even that they're interrelated in some important way? How do you get from that to, well, the necessary precondition for them, either individually or collectively, is the Orthodox Christian God?
Right. That's why I included the aspect of divine conceptualism, that when I speak of grounding things or giving an account for things, I'm grounding them in an omniscient, eternal, divine mind that is able to connect and interrelate all of these different things. For example, unless there is an external world, and for example, as you know from classic problems in the history of philosophy, if I begin with the human mind, I can never really prove that there is an external world if my starting point is autonomous human reasoning. So I kind of have to just assume that there is an external world, and there's 4 or 5 other key things that I could list from the history of any critique of empiricism. Like the myth of the given, the problem of induction, the external world, the existence of abstract objects. Those are typical problems in any empiricist type of worldview, and most of the time, 95% of the time, I'm arguing against somebody who's got an empiricist presupposition. So I would say that if you are an empiricist and your presupposition is that there is no external, or that those issues are just assumed, then I would say, okay, they're assumed, but how do you ground something like numbers? How do you ground something like logic? Because you can't ground it or give a justification for it just by saying that these types of things are equated to matter or material forces or energy or motion, matter in flux, basically, because the characteristic of immaterial, invariant, abstract objects is that they don't change. They're not subject to flux, right? So that would apply to numbers, abstract objects, concepts, logical laws, any of these types of things. They don't evolve. They don't, change with the way that matter evolves or changes. So therefore, where are they and how are they grounded? And so ultimately, any empiricist position ends up in nominalism. And so the only other option really is a form of universalism, to believe in the existence of universals, or to believe in some way to ground them in an external beyond the finite human mind. And really, the only other option that's left is some form of divine conceptualism.
So, your way to get to the Orthodox Christian God is to say, at least with regards to abstracta, is that, well, these things are real. We're realists about these things, and the only way to be realist about them is to say that they're grounded in
Yes,
or a divine mind. They're conceptual. So why would we suppose that? I mean, how do you demonstrate that? The 2 steps, right? The first, ignore the step. Just for the sake of argument, we can suppose that we're realists about these things. I tend not to be. I lean nominalist, but we can suppose that we're realists. And the question I'm asking is, how do you demonstrate that the only coherent way to be a realist is to be a divine conceptualist about them?
Because we need a mind or a substrate or substructure, you could say, that is able to string all of these pearls together on a single string, right? Because again, it's not just that I'm going to, all I have to do is prove the existence of numbers, right? Well, the world is not just numbers. I mean, there's also other things going on. There's, causation and all these other things. So I believe that all of those things are interrelated. And so what we're arguing for is a competing worldviews, competing paradigms. And my paradigm makes sense. It's coherent. I believe in a coherence view in a limited sense of what's true. And so I have a worldview. I have a paradigm where there is a revealed deity, God, who makes sense of those things. It makes sense that if man is made in the image of God, he has the ability to use logic, to use reasoning, analogically speaking, because he's made in the image of the divine mind of God. He has a mind like God has a mind. He can do logic. He can do moral reasoning and so forth, like God. So the whole idea of being made in the image of God, I'm not saying it's true because it's stated in Scripture. I'm saying that the Christian paradigm makes sense as to why it would be that way. So I'm grounding these abstract things in the divine mind, because the divine mind is unique, and therefore it's my starting point. My starting point is not a finite human mind, because if I go with nominalism and empiricism, I'm stuck in the box of all the limitations and self-refutations that empiricism leads to.
Yeah, but my question...
So I know your question was, how do you prove it? Well, by the impossibility of the contrary. There's no other paradigm that gives a coherent account of all of these things.
Okay, good. Right. Okay, this is the sort of thing I'm looking for. So, yeah, any other worldview which doesn't include the Orthodox Christian God as the sort of foundation, or the transcendental precondition, whatever, leads to absurdity, or is impossible. And so the question is, how do you, in order to back up that claim, right, you're going to have to assume, for any arbitrary view which doesn't include the Orthodox Christian God as a necessary precondition, you're going to have to derive some sort of contradiction or absurdity. Right? So how do you do that? I mean, what is the argument for that?
Well, I mean, there are limited numbers of steps that you can go in any worldview. There's not an infinite number of worldviews if we think of starting points. Now, I mean, conceivably there could be, I guess, an infinite number of variations down the line in people's worldviews, but every worldview has a limited number of places that it can go when you start with, the basic questions of metaphysics, the basic questions of epistemology, and the basic questions of ethics, right? That makes up a worldview. And there's not an infinite number of ways that you can answer the basics of those disciplines. So, does the external world exist or not? Is there are there objective ethics or not? You're limited actually in the number of ways that you can go. And in terms of worldviews, we're also, at least in the ones that we typically interact with, we're not usually interacting with that many worldviews. Most worldviews, for example, start out with basic principles of monism or dualism. Now, Christianity is unique because it's neither monist nor dualist. It has a more nuanced, tiered system to reality. But just for example, a lot of the Far East
and stuff like that, or is that what you're talking about?
Say what?
Like hierarchy of being and stuff like that, or are you talking about something else?
Well, I'm just using metaphysics as an example of the fact that typically when you interact in an apologetic way with other religions, you find that there's not actually that many different positions on something like, what is the fundamental nature of reality? Is it all one thing, or is it all two things? And that's why a lot of ancient religions have been either monistic or dualistic. And I'm just using that as an example to show that if you look at the metaphysics of any system, most of the time they're either monistic or dualistic in a lot of religions, right? So I don't have to refute every single infinite worldview, because there's a limited number of ways you can go.
So, I mean, even if we suppose that there's only a limited number of possible worldviews, I'm not sure that there is. It seems we could have any number of.
Okay, if I ask if I ask basic questions in metaphysics, how many different ways do you think those questions can be answered? For example, is there an external world or not? Like, is there an infinite number of ways to answer that question?
No, perhaps not, right? But that's not what I'm saying, right? I was willing to grant that there are a limited number of worldviews. You asked the question of how do you not have to refute all possible worldviews, and I'm saying that because every worldview is limited in its beginning starting point steps. So what, right? I mean, you have to have.
So all I have to do is because all I have to do is refute those starting points, and the whole paradigm falls apart.
Yeah, as long as that refuting those starting point refutes all other possible worldviews, right?
But there's only because every worldview, because you're not understanding the limitations of philosophy. Like, every worldview is limited in the beginning points of where you can go. So there's not an infinite number of worldviews in terms of starting points. There's maybe an infinite number of variations down the line. But again, this is like, if you just look at comparative religion, you'll find that most religions in the world historically are either monistic or dualistic. Now, not every single one, I'm just giving that as one example of an easy way to cancel out almost all of the other religions out there.
Right. So I can agree. Just depending on what you mean by starting points, right? If worldview starting points is just going to be responses to some basic metaphysical questions, then of course, yeah, there's going to be a limited number of starting points.
Well, I mean, you're saying then, of course, as if that wasn't clear. I mean, what else would a worldview starting point mean than what I said?
But I was talking about worldviews, like some particular, not just about starting points. But it doesn't matter, right?
Again, it doesn't matter whether you're a Buddhist or whether you're a Hindu or whether you're a Muslim or whether you're an atheist or whether you're a New Ager. Everybody's going to have to answer and go in a limited number of either or steps at the beginning of their worldview.
Sure, that's fine. I mean, we can grant that and suppose that this restricts the number of possible worldviews.
If you grant that, then your original contention that I have to refute every worldview doesn't hold.
Well, yes, it does, right? Because if those are the only ways that worldviews can be, then those are still all the worldviews, right? And you
were implying that there's like an infinite number of worldviews. I have to refute them all or something.
Well, I mean, I do think there is an infinite number of possible worldviews, but that's not really relevant,
in terms of starting points. Like if I let me give you an example. If a position starts out with like a basic assumption that all reality is purely relativistic, and there's many worldviews, many religions that hold to that, right? That there's no epistemic certitude or certain truth. Everything is purely relative. And I refute that proposition by pointing out that that proposition itself is a truth claim that claims to be absolute and universal. And it doesn't matter whether that person is a skeptic atheist or whether that person is believes in Maya, everything's illusory, or just some random dude on the street who's, taking philosophy 101 and believes everything's relative. That refutes all those worldviews because that's a basic epistemic starting point.
So I agree, right? Well, at least for the general approach. I can suppose that you can disprove entire classes of worldviews, right? All of those that have one of these problematic responses to these metaphysical questions, right? But that's not going to be enough. Refuting some number of worldviews is not going to be enough to demonstrate your claim unless you can refute all of the worldviews which are not Christian theism. I mean, that's your claim. You're claiming that the alternatives are impossible.
Well, that's one part of the argument. The argument is not just a negative reductio. I'm also positing a positive paradigm that's to be compared with any other paradigm.
Okay, then you can do that after, but you said this was your claim, and you'd have to...
It doesn't matter whether you do it before or after. You can do it either way, because the argument is still the same, whichever chronological starting point you use. The argument doesn't change.
Sure, you're just giving yourself an extra burden there. I don't know. Well, I mean, I guess the second one is not really needed if you can already show that the rest are incoherent or impossible, because then
again,
yours is coherent and others are not. Then
right. So what I'm doing is comparing paradigms, and everybody has a paradigm. And unless you want to be like, I'm not saying you, but hypothetically, unless the person wants to be a sophist and be like, oh well, I don't have to accept any position in epistemology, ethics, and metaphysics. Well, if you do that, then you can't debate. You can't argue anything. So that kind of like super agnostic relativism can't even come to the table. So by necessity, if you accept that philosophy is, basically what we mean is a worldview, a paradigm, again, you are very much limited in those three domains. I don't know how else to say this. If somebody makes a really, really extremely strong statement like all truth is relative, I mean, that completely destroys the possibility of knowledge at all. And that knocks out a gigantic portion of worldviews, right?
Yeah,
just
so
one example.
I can agree, for the sake of argument, that relativism about truth is incoherent or something like that. And that any worldview which is relativist about truth is false for that reason. Let's just grant that, sure. And you could argue that about a bunch of other things too. But unless you can argue that about in a way which applies to all other worldviews, you haven't demonstrated the falsehood, let alone the impossibility of the contrary.
If what we're arguing over makes knowledge itself impossible, then it is a cancellation of all the other worldviews. That's why I don't have to go into all the specifics, because everybody has a few basic places that they have to start in their worldview, period.
Yeah.
Like,
So
you have to.
yeah.
That's why I listed the transcendental preconditions. That's what we're talking about here, right? So how many worldviews can give an account for those?
Well, you're saying that there's only one. That's your
Right.
claim. So how do you demonstrate that?
By challenging it and going up against any other worldview or critiquing any of the erroneous positions in the starting points. You're going to have to demonstrate. You're going to have to demonstrate that there are no basic starting points for worldviews if you're going to uphold the argument you're trying to make.
No. So
yes, you are.
Give me a minute.
No, because you're still trying to argue that there's an infinite variation of worldviews, and until I demonstrate every single one of them is false.
Whatever. Let's suppose that there's some
not whatever.
Number.
That's
it makes
the
no
argument.
difference. Well, no. I mean, it's inconsequential. I mean, if you want to argue about how many different possible,
it's not inconsequential.
I'll argue
if
that
there are a
many,
limited,
but it doesn't matter.
It does matter because there's a limited number of starting points, and the starting points are intimately connected to, and oftentimes are, preconditions of knowledge.
Okay.
If there are preconditions that we're debating over, there's not an infinite number of ways you can try to argue out of that.
Sure. I mean, there's two different things we're talking about at this point, right? We're talking about worldviews as a whole and the starting points of in people's worldviews. I could grant that there's a finite number of possible starting points, whatever that means exactly, but still think there's.
I mean, you say whatever that means exactly. I've defined it exactly multiple times for you. Ethics, metaphysics, epistemology. There's a limited number of places that we can. Let's take ethics. Right? I mean, there's either objective ethics or there aren't. Right.
Right.
Or maybe you think there's both, right? So that's what, a couple different places you could go with that.
Sure. I mean, there's a lot of more questions.
Okay, and you don't think that
you
most
might classify starting points.
Okay, and I don't know why you're taking issue with whether that's a starting point. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you want to if you want to pick a different thing, like can you know ethical propositions?
Right.
I mean, either of those could be sayings. I'm just saying basic positions or maxims within a philosophical system. It doesn't have to be the ones I pick.
It's a little bit vague about what you're including as a starting point, even if you're talking about ethics, epistemology, and metaphysics, whatever.
Well, I mean, do you want more examples? I mean, I gave you. You said it's vague. I gave you multiple examples. I said most religions fall into monism or dualism. That's a basic metaphysical position that most positions fall into from the outset. There's not a lot of options. There's not a lot of options for people to go there. Like if you're a materialist. You pretty much believe in monism. Sometimes there are materialists that believe that there are essences or higher level abstract entities, and so that's dualistic.
Okay, so it's fine enough that your clarification on starting points is good enough, right? Because it's more or less irrelevant to the point I'm trying to make. It's your claim, right, that.
No, it's not irrelevant because you're arguing like this is a foundationalist type of argument. Like until I empirically demonstrate that every worldview is false, my argument won't hold. That only assumes that foundationalism is true, and I'm not. I'm a presuppositionalist, so I'm making a presuppositional argument. I'm cutting through a lot of the bullshit and saying that none of that stuff ultimately matters if I can demonstrate something that's prior to empirical.
Is he cutting out, or is this just me?
No, he's cutting out. Jay, you're kind of cutting out a little bit.
That out from under people, then that.
Let me come out and back in.
It might go out a little bit in this.
Okay, yeah, he just lagged out. He'll be back though. Hello, Jay.
Is that better?
No.
No, you're still lagging a little bit. Jay, can you still hear us fine though? Can you still hear Detroyer fine?
Oh, did you just disconnect again?
No, he's still here. I just want to make sure that you don't.
Yes, I can hear. I'm just waiting. I'm waiting until I get past this point in the road.
Maybe give me a minute to kind of clarify what.
Yeah, if you want to clarify your position, and maybe my connection will get better.
Yeah. So you made the claim earlier that the way you demonstrate your conclusion that the Christian God is the necessary precondition for these what you call transcendental categories, is by the impossibility of the contrary, which is just to say that any other worldview, or which doesn't include the Christian God or the Orthodox Christian God as a precondition for these things, is absurd. It leads to a contradiction. It's incoherent. And what I've been asking is a demonstration of that claim, right? How do you get to the conclusion that for any other worldview that it leads to a contradiction? Because that's your claim. And then you started talking about, well, all these other worldviews have a certain number of limited starting points, right? I could agree with that. But if that's going to demonstrate your claim, you'd have to say something like this. Orthodox Christianity has a particular response to those starting points, which are unique to Orthodox Christianity, and every other response on those starting points leads to contradiction. You could do something like that, and if that's your approach,
that's no different than a transcendental argument, dude. That's no different than a transcendental argument.
Right, but then make the argument, right? I mean, you have to demonstrate the claim.
Yeah, I am demonstrating the claim by pointing out that we don't have fundamental contradictions that destroy the possibility of knowledge, and the other worldviews have contradictory claims that destroy the possibility of knowledge. That is the argument. Great.
So the premise that the other worldviews, remember that I assume you mean all non-Orthodox Christian worldviews.
Correct.
Entail the impossibility of knowledge or something like that.
Correct.
Okay. So how do we show that that's the case?
Because they have fundamental flaws at the beginning of their positions that destroy the possibility of knowledge, and they can't give an account for the things they use. That is the argument. Do you not understand that is an argument?
Well, it's claims, which it is an argument, right? There's premises and conclusion, but
so do you deny that
doubting the premises themselves?
Do you deny that transcendental arguments are valid forms of argumentation?
No, of course they are. They're valid.
Okay, then you shouldn't object to the argument, because if it's a valid form of argumentation,
hang on,
that's
but you
the
can
argument.
Object to the premises of a valid argument. One of your premises was that all other worldviews.
Okay, so give a worldview that's coherent.
But that's not my claim, right? Your claim is that all other worldviews.
No, it is a claim, because what worldview debates and transcendental argumentation is about worldviews. So I'm comparing my worldview to your worldview, which you haven't said what your worldview is yet, because you're not making an argument. You're just trying to hypothetically find a flaw in my position. My argument is simple.
Why is my worldview relevant to your claim that all of the worldviews?
Because it's worldview presupposition. Because it's a worldview debates question. It's my paradigm versus your paradigm, and now you're trying to switch it into classical foundationalist debates as if it's just a question of going through the different positions one by one.
No. Now, if you want, okay.
No, can you give an account? Can you give an account for the things that I've listed at the beginning of the debate?
Sure. I mean, I can talk about some of my views on.
Give an account. That's what we're here to do. That's what we're here. That's what the debate is about, dude. Yes, it is.
No, it isn't. So we can get into that, but that's not what the debate was about, and it's not. Wouldn't demonstrate your claim.
I'm getting ahead of you because I'm heading you off. Listen, I'm heading you off to explain that for your argument to work, what you're doing, you're going to need to prove classical foundationalism. That's what you're going to have to do. So all I have to do is go back to pointing out the 5 major self-contradictions of a classical empiricist type of worldview.
Well, I don't really consider myself a foundationist, not really in the traditional sense, but that's not really relevant.
For your argument, it is, because you're not understanding paradigms. You're trying to trap me on. Basically, you're saying that there aren't paradigm-level questions that prove and disprove paradigms. That's what you're having to say. You're not explicitly saying that, but for your argument to work, that's what you have to say.
Sure. So, but your argument was, or your claim was, all other worldviews lead to a contradiction, or at least
correct,
are incompatible with knowledge.
They destroy the possibilities of knowledge. That's different.
Right. And when I asked you for a demonstration of that, at that point you're saying, okay, what's your...
Do you not understand that the demonstration is the multiple examples I've already given, and then you turn around and say, well, give me an example. Give me a demonstration.
No.
How many more do you need?
Enough to rule out all other worldviews, which is just what your claim is. So
because all other worldviews are limited in their starting points, and if they start with basic contradictions, and they all do, then the argument holds.
You're saying that they all do. That's the
Correct.
the premise that I'm not convinced of. How do you show that all of the other worldviews start with contradiction?
Because there's a limited number of places.
Sorry.
There's a limited number of places that any possible worldview can go. Don't you understand that?
I agree. Yeah.
If I could just interject really quick, I think you guys at this point are at an impasse on this issue. I think when it comes to this, I think what Jay's obviously, for people who might not understand, Jay's saying basically only Orthodox Christianity can make sense of reality and can actually ground these categories of our experience that are needed. And Detroyer is saying that there's a burden of proof for that claim that Jay can't meet. And what Jay is saying is that we can sort of, although there's different numerators, there's sort of a common denominator, right?
Yes.
Would that be a proper characterization?
Yes. It doesn't matter what your different worldview is, how many you can pick 32 different flavors. It doesn't matter, because all I have to do is ask you the basic questions of epistemology, metaphysics, and ethics, and you're going to destroy yourself.
So, okay.
And that's why you won't present your own worldview.
Hang on. I can present
because I will easily dissect your worldview.
We can do that. We will do that in a few minutes.
Well, that's what you don't want to do, because you don't actually have a challenge to Christianity.
No.
Then let's do that.
We will do that, but that's not. This is not the point of the debate. So
it is the point of the debate. The debate is the comparison of paradigms. You're going to have to prove that there aren't limited numbers of paradigms.
No. So suppose that I present some of my views on these matters, and you demonstrate some problem in my view, and it's really convincing, right?
You don't understand that it's not just some problem. You don't understand the difference between a paradigm level problem and just some logical conundrum.
Right. No, we can suppose.
Okay, so if you understood that,
if
you understood that, you wouldn't keep making the argument based on a misunderstanding or on a flawed argumentation that I have to demonstrate every other worldview is false. No, I don't, because every other worldview can be boiled down to a limited number of options in each of these positions. Very limited.
Wait, hang on. You said every other worldview is impossible. Certainly, you
correct.
Think they're also false. So that's also a burden you've taken.
Yes, I'm not shying the burden. I'm telling you how that's done.
Right, but the way that isn't done is by taking one worldview or a few worldviews at a time and refuting them, right?
Yes, it is, because as I've explained to you about 20 times, there's a limited number of places for any worldview to start. You had a problem with starting points because you don't understand paradigms.
No, I understand.
Yes, you did.
Starting
no, you don't.
I
because you wouldn't be making the argument you're making if you understood paradigms.
Well, then what is my misunderstanding then? I mean, I'm asking.
Once again,
we can grant that there's these limited starting points.
There are a limited number of options for any possible worldview in the basic areas of philosophy. And if you keep saying right and keep saying sure, then don't turn around and say that I have to refute every possible worldview.
Wait, but
because that doesn't make sense, dude.
Wait, but yes, you can, right? So here's the sort of argument I thought.
I can refute every possible worldview that you put forward, because all I have to do is boil them down to the basic starting points where they mess up. Do you not understand?
Right, but if you can show that,
I can show it. Throw them up. Put them up. Put up a worldview.
Okay. If you can show that all of the worldviews go wrong at some point on those basic questions,
correct,
right? Then you've given some sort of reductio against all other worldviews.
Correct.
Right? You don't have to take them one at a time.
Correct.
Because they all go wrong on these starting points, and so they're all false.
Yeah, but you still have to name an example of a worldview.
But that's not how you demonstrate that claim, right?
Yes,
it's not enough to say this worldview is false and this worldview is false when your claim is that all of these worldviews are false, right? Unless you can go through one by one.
No, again, if you say this again, I'm going to have to just point it out again that you've already admitted that I don't have to go through them one by one when I can boil them down. Right. So I can boil them down to the basic presuppositions. That's paradigm level argumentation. You don't understand paradigms. That's what
I understand that you don't have to go through them one by one. In fact, I would prefer
then
that
don't
you
turn
didn't,
around and say that I have to. That's like
I prefer that you didn't, because that's never going to demonstrate your claim unless you would go through each of them one by one.
Right. So look, let's stop here. a presupposition that I have, and I think it's a correct presupposition, is that everybody has a belief system, right? A philosophy of life. And there are very limited numbers of ways that they can go in the questions that start off, starting points, basic maxims. Mm-hmm. You've already admitted that that's the case. And since you admit that that's the case, I do not have to refute every single possible worldview, because they all deviate and derive from those basic principles and maxims that start the argument.
Wait, but you
so
would
it
be
doesn't matter whether it's Hindu or Muslim. I would be what?
So let me. So
this
is kind of the
soft. This is total sophistry. Like, you're not making an argument. You're not putting up anything.
What? So let me state what I thought your approach would be. Right. So
you're not here to present an argument. You're here to critique Chag. That's fine. But the argument is about paradigms, and you're saying I don't have a paradigm. I just question paradigms.
I never said that. Well,
that's what you're doing.
So let me. Well, I'm questioning your argument.
Right. But you're not. You're contradicting, because you're saying that I don't have to disprove every worldview. You admit that they boil down to basic presuppositions, and that's why I say yes. They will all err, because there's a limited number of ways. There's only. Let me put it simply for you. There's about, I don't know. Let me ad hoc boil it down to, I don't know, 8 different possibilities that you could have in, like, say, something like metaphysics or ethics.
Sure.
That's a limitation by the nature of this world, and by the nature of human limitations and infinitude. That's all the options you have. So there's not an infinite variation.
Right.
The variation comes down the line after those starting points are granted.
Right. Okay. So let's suppose it's 8.
Okay,
maybe
if you keep saying right, keep saying right, okay, then don't turn around and contradict it.
So let's suppose it's 8. Maybe it's a little bit more, a little bit less, whatever. It's not really relevant exactly how many there are, but there's some relatively small finite number of different possible answers on these starting points. Is this the sort of argument you want to make? So,
yes, it is.
Orthodox Christianity has a particular response to each of those questions that is unique to Orthodox Christianity. And all other responses to those basic questions lead to contradictions.
They lead to the impossibility of knowledge itself, not merely a contradiction. And if you understood paradigms, you would know that that's what we're arguing. We're not just arguing that there's a contradiction. Any possible argument can contradict. There could be a contradiction in anybody's worldview about something stupid like, do they live next door to Lil Wayne? I mean, they could contradict on that. That's different than
but it's a contradiction on some fundamental level and on the worldview level, paradigm level.
And that's what we're talking about.
That's what we're talking about. Sure, yeah. So,
and you're saying, do I really want to make that argument? Yes, I do.
Great. That's good so far. I think I'm getting a little bit more clarity here. But then my question is, it's a 2-part question. First of all, I guess it would have to be, what is the response that Orthodox Christianity has on each of these matters? And the second part is, why does the other response on each of these matters, or any other response on each of these matters, lead to a contradiction, or on the worldview level?
Maybe to focus in, could we maybe talk about, I think Jay mentioned laws of logic. Maybe what about laws of logic and God is, Jay, like, what about logic?
That's a great example. Like I said, so like at the beginning, I was giving examples of things like abstract entities or objects. If you want to talk about epistemology, there's no worldview out there that can deny logic, right? And have a rational, coherent basis for reasoning and argumentation, and for building rockets and doing this the kinds of things that logic and math help us do. So there's no worldview out there that can, like, deny them or equate them to the material realm. So I already in the opening statement gave multiple examples of the very things that we're using now. I can just repeat it and say that, so if you try to say that abstract objects are identical to physical matter, if you're a physicalist, if you're a reductionist, all of those positions lead to incoherence and nonsense and destroy the possibility of knowledge. So we have to ground them somewhere. You're limited in the number of options of where you could ground them. I mean, if you want to get creative and say, I want to ground them in Cheese Whiz, and my God is Cheese Whiz. Okay, but that doesn't satisfy the conditions for justification, right? But the type of being that we're arguing for does satisfy the conditions of justifying propositions and beliefs precisely because he has the nature, the characteristics, the attributes that would ground that in a coherent worldview, right? So if, again, man is made in the image of God, he has a mind to reason like God. There are abstract categories, logic, etc., that reflect the mind of God, that are grounded in the omniscient mind of God, that underlie all of reality and yet are not identical.
Right. I understand that you have a theology, but I'm trying to understand. So we're going to take logic. So you had an argument, more or less, that any plausible worldview must think that these are real, that logical laws are true, or something like that.
My phone cut out. Could you repeat that last sentence?
Sorry. So at the first stage, you were saying something like,
"It's not a stage; it's just an example." I'm just
but you're just engaging in sort of reasoning there, and the first part was something like all worldviews, which aren't like contradictory at the paradigm level, must suppose that these laws of logic are real or something, or true, or something like that, right?
Sure, absolutely. I was giving examples of like why you are limited, right? Like I could get creative and just come up with crazy stuff, but it's not going to work. That's what I'm trying to say. So he was saying, why don't you use the laws of logic as an example? And I'm saying, okay, let's talk about the laws of logic. What worldview can make sense of them? And I'm saying that in the Christian paradigm, when you get the stuff that I said about how we're made in the image of God, we have a mind, we can reason about reality. The laws of logic reflect God's mind. They're not identical to the divine mind. They're invariant. They're conceptual. They're not grounded in the human mind, which is also changing, created, in flux, etc. That is a worldview that can give a ground and a justification for immaterial objects, right? If you start with empiricism, you can't.
So you have, so on your view, you have this explanation for why these things are true and how we can reason according to them.
Right, a coherent view. All right, I'm not saying
coherent.
that we can like know every single fact about reality. No worldview can provide that. But in the Christian paradigm, it does make sense how man can reason after God and do these kinds of things. It makes sense in that worldview. In an atheist materialist worldview, it does not make sense at a fundamental level.
Even if I grant that in an atheist materialist view, it doesn't make sense, your claim is that in a non-Orthodox Christian view, it doesn't make sense.
Correct.
And so, right. So I'm trying to understand, first of all, why someone has to... we can grant that a coherent worldview must suppose that these things are true. But why do we have to go any further than that? I mean, why can't someone suppose that they're true and they're just necessary truths, or that they're grounded some other way? I mean, how are these views not only false but incoherent?
Because that would be ad hoc to just say that they're necessarily true and not give a justification for them.
Wait, but even if it's ad hoc, I mean, so what? That's not incoherence.
Actually, ad hoc would be incoherent because it's not giving a justification.
Not giving a justification is not absurdity. It's not a contradiction. It's just not giving a justification.
Well, if you're coming, but we're engaged in a debate, an apologetic, and
Sure.
in debates and in apologetics, if you want to give a justification for something, then you can't be ad hoc. I mean, you can free will choose to be ad hoc, but that's not a good argument.
Well, hang on. Okay, I could grant that if I'm trying to give an argument for something, and all I'm doing is giving ad hoc explanations.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So you're
Then
not contradicting by being ad hoc, but that's not explaining or giving a justification, and so you're not doing debates or apologetics at that point. You're just doing sophistry.
No, but I don't understand. You're claiming that all worldviews, whether those people who have those worldviews are engaged.
Okay, if you want to have a sophistic ad hoc worldview, you can do that, but you're not going to be able to debate and do apologetics. So you have to put the microphone down and leave because you're not here to debate. Because debate presupposes that you're going to give an account and a justification logically and coherently for your beliefs.
Yeah. So I guess there's two things I want to point out. The first is, so I guess you're admitting that. So
it's interesting that you won't say.
Hey Jay, can we just let him? Can we just let him finish, and then you can go uninterrupted after that?
Yeah. So two things. It seems to be that you're conceding that it being ad hoc is not absurd or contradictory, which I take it as just
Okay, so what's
refutation of your
absurd
main
and
claim.
contradictory?
Wait, just
Second-
let Jay, just please let him finish.
And second, I thought on your view as well, there's something which you're not providing justification for. It's the existence of the God in which you believe, right? I mean, you don't have any additional justification for that, or at least it's justified in terms of.
So you just showed
its
that you don't
coherence for the rest of your
understand.
view.
You just showed that you don't understand transcendental arguments and you don't understand justification for beliefs. Because if you understood transcendental arguments, which you claimed you did, you would know that the transcendental argument is a form of justification. It's a different type of justification. It's not no justification. It's the same mistake Matt Dillahunty made, where he just said, presuppositions can't be justified. No, that's not true. They're justified by comparison of paradigms. That's why it's a coherentist view and not a foundationalist view.
No, I understand how.
And secondly,
you transcendental argument
okay, look,
to justify.
Yeah, this is
sure.
now you're moving the definitions of terms and saying that, well, I'm not contradicting if I come up with an ad hoc worldview. Yeah, but that's not doing apologetics. That's not doing debate. If you want to debate Christianity and the existence of God, then you do have to give an account for your beliefs, and you can't be ad hoc. Okay. That should be obvious. I mean, it's sophistical of you to argue this.
No. So when you said you said that all other worldviews lead into contradictions if they answer
in the context of
Orthodox
debates,
theism.
dude. In the context of debates, obviously. So now
What do you
you're
mean in
trying
the
to
context of debates? You're talking about on terms of
We're doing
paradigms,
apologetics.
right?
That's what comparison of paradigms is. Apologetics. That's what we're doing. We're here to debate. It's a debate, you said, right? We're not here to do sophistry.
Well, I'm trying. You're saying that.
Thank you. I know you're trying to do sophistry. Exactly.
Okay. I'm not sure how else to say this point, right? You're claiming that.
Can you give an account for the laws of logic?
Just let Detroyer finish, and then Detroyer, if you want, you can answer that question.
Sure. You claimed that all of the other worldviews, which answer differently on these starting points, metaphysical starting points, and ethics, and whatever, lead to incoherence or contradiction on the paradigm level.
Yeah, in the context of debate, dude. Obviously.
Well,
you're basically saying that. Okay, I don't want to debate. You're basically saying I don't want to debate. That's what apologetics is. That's what debate is. Have you ever done a formal debate?
Sure. Yeah, of course.
Really?
Okay, let's just. I think about the debate thing is a little off topic. Just to try to.
What if I don't believe in making arguments? That's sophistry.
So, yeah. So that's
what you just said. You just said.
Jay, we gotta let him get his thought out.
It's just a plain counterexample. It's just a plain counterexample to your claim. Your claim is all worldviews, which answer differently on these matters, lead to contradiction. Some worldviews don't lead to contradiction on these matters. So your claim is false. I don't know what more there is to say.
No, this is the dumbest argument I've ever heard. This is literally the dumbest argument I've ever heard. Because it's not. Now you just admitted that it's a debate, but then you said you're not debating by just replying ad hoc.
Are you saying it's not a counterexample to your claim, or is it a counterexample?
It's a counterexample that doesn't apply to debate, and we're here to debate.
But whether it applies to debate or not, is it a counterexample to your claim?
We're here to do apologetics. So it's apples and oranges, dummy.
No, you made.
Hey, let's not insult people's character or insult people's intelligence, guys.
Okay, then let's not engage in sophistry because you're not arguing. You're not giving.
I think it's fine if you think that, but Detroyer's been good enough to come on and debate, and I think he's just trying to finish a point. So let's just let him finish it.
Your argument. Now, look, this is not an argument. What you're trying to do is sophistry. If you say that all I have to do is say ad hoc, and therefore I'm getting out of your claim that worldviews are contradictory, that's not getting out of the claim, because the worldviews are contradictory in the domain of debate and logic. And to bow out of debate and logic, which is what saying I'm just going to be ad hoc does, means that you're no longer debating. That should be obvious. That's why it's sophistry.
No. So when we're I'll just repeat.
What do you mean no?
You're laughing? Jay, you have to let him finish. Go ahead, Detroyer.
So it's important to note, right, then when I'm talking about these possible worldviews, I'm not saying anything about what I'm committed to or my particular worldview.
Yeah, because I know.
We can move into that, my views on some of these issues. But the claim is just this. You claimed that all other non-Orthodox Christian views go wrong on these starting points in terms of metaphysics.
Do you understand what giving an account? Let
me finish
what a
the point.
justification.
Yeah, just let him.
No,
I'm not
going
be able to go
if the guy's
uninterrupted.
not. No, if he's not going to give an account, then I'm not going to keep doing this because
he's just
not
responding
giving an
to
account.
He's just trying to clarify his point about his critique of the argument, and then after that he can. And then after that, we'll shift to that, and we can get into that. But just let Detroyer finish up his thoughts on that.
Okay. We have these sort of metaphysical, epistemological, ethical starting points, and the questions about them that all worldviews have to answer, and we can grant that. And your claim was that worldviews which don't give the uniquely Orthodox Christian worldviews lead to absurdity, incoherence. And you said, and then when I brought up an example of, well, what if someone just supposes that these things, even if it's ad hoc, that these things are necessary, you said, well, okay. At first you said ad hoc is incoherent, and then you seem to walk that back and saying, well, it's not incoherent.
No, you're misrepresenting me. It's incoherent if you're going to try to debate with that position. Don't you get that? You don't understand what a justification is for a claim?
Yeah, I get what the justification is.
No, you don't, because then you couldn't argue for ad hoc stuff. I know that's not your position; it's your hypothetical position. But that's not
even
making
my
an
hypothetical
argument.
Position. We're just talking about.
You are making a hypothetical position. Come on, dude. This is ridiculous. You're making
in the sense that we're talking about possible worldviews, and that's
oh my gosh, yes. So that's not giving an account or justification, and that's what we're here to do.
Sure, you're giving a justification for the claim that all other worldviews lead to contradiction. This is just, even if it's an ad hoc and the person couldn't debate using this worldview, it's still not.
Then it's not relevant. It's not.
How is that not?
Because
it's still a worldview. It's still a counterexample.
It's not relevant.
There's just no way around this.
No, you don't understand basic logic and justification for claims. This is irrelevant to a debate.
I don't understand. It's
an ad hoc reply is irrelevant. An ad hoc reply is irrelevant. I'm just going to reply to you, God exists. And you're going to say that's ad hoc. If you can be ad hoc, then that's a logical fallacy, goofus.
Ad hocness is a logical fallacy? But whatever.
You didn't know that?
It's not, but...
Ad hoc is a logical fact. Being ad hoc is absolutely a logical fact.
I'm not even going to take that bait.
You just lost the debate.
Ad hocness is a logical
All right, Detroyer, let's try to focus in. Let's try to really focus in. Jay, just really quick, guys. Just really quick. I want to, I don't think, Detroyer, you ever really got a chance to answer Jay's question.
No, but see,
about,
if he's going to say, hold on. If he's going to say ad hoc is not a fallacy, the debate is over. Come on.
It's not a logical fallacy.
I'll just if that's how it is, then we'll let Detroyer make you two more points, try to make them quick, and then if you remember Jay's question, if not, he can re-ask it, but try to respond to that.
So,
dude, this is the dumbest debate I've ever had. You're worse than Mark Brahman. You literally think that being ad hoc is not a fallacy.
So it's not a logical fallacy.
Jay, I'm sorry, I had to. You just got to let him finish.
All right.
I apologize that you feel that way.
So, yeah, it feels like we've hit a roadblock here, because your claim was that all of the worldviews lead to contradiction, and then we discussed the possible
ad hoc rescue is a basic logic fallacy.
Hang on, even if the worldview is ad hoc, or certain beliefs that the person has, if they were to hold that worldview at ad hoc, it just doesn't matter to the claim that it's contradictory, that it's incoherent. Your claim was that it's incoherent, not just that it's.
You're done. You're done. You lost when you said it wasn't a fallacy. You're like Mark Brahman. You did the exact same thing. Brahman.
Hang on.
No. Is it a fallacy or not?
Whether
I want you to reaffirm it for the 15th time that it's not.
Ad hoc claims is not a logical fallacy. I'll say that as many times.
The debate is over and you just lost.
That's not true.
It's a basic fallacy. You just lost.
It's not a lot. What are logical fallacies?
Rescue is a basic logic fallacy. This is so dumb.
So yeah, this is getting into the weeds. Let's both
this
of us.
This is not the weeds.
Whether ad hoc is a fallacy, you guys obviously both think that each other's positions on this are absurd.
I'm done. This is totally retarded. I'm not debating over a basic logic fallacy that any logic 101 guy would know.
Okay, well, Detroyer, how about you just give a response
even though it's
to
false, that
Jay's question.
give me a
He's left
second.
the VC.
I could grant, even though it isn't true, that providing ad hoc responses is a logical fallacy. Whatever, I could grant that, but that's either way. That's not what I'm doing, right? It's not like my response, my criticism of your argument is as ad hoc. I'm pointing out a counterexample. That's anything but ad hoc, right? And so whether the the person who would hold that worldview, that hypothetical worldview, would have to engage in ad hoc reasoning in order to come to believe it, is just irrelevant to the point. It's a worldview that they could have, which is not incoherent, and that just is a straightforward counterexample to your claim. And I've just heard no response to that counterexample at all.
I apologize, Detroyer. He has left the left the voice chat. I don't know if I think he just left. I don't think he is interested in the debate anymore.
Yeah, that was going nowhere.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm not, just to answer, maybe for some people who are interested, Jay asked, how do you ground the laws of logic, and how would you go about doing that? Or do you think they need a grounding or whatever, just to sort of wrap it up?
Yeah, that's a tricky question. I'm not entirely opposed to, like when we say that these laws of logic are true, it's very mysterious about what it would be that makes them true. I mean, even on versions of theism, I'm not sure what it is that would make them true, and so I'm somewhat open to possibilities of pluralism or even some sorts of nihilism about these claims. I don't have a solid answer on what, first of all, whether these are true propositions mined independently, and what it is that is the truth maker for those claims. So, yeah, I don't have any strong opinions on that matter.
All right. I appreciate the answer. I appreciate coming on, Detroyer. It was really fun to see you debate. I would say to Jay, but unfortunately Jay has left. So do you mind if I start unmuting people a little bit? Just people who might have questions. If anyone has questions,
yeah, sure. I'm
for you.
open to have any.
Yeah. So if anyone has questions for Detroyer specifically, Jay was here. You can ask in the chat.
I unmuted Helios. But yeah, I unmuted Helios because he's been going off in the chat that like Detroyer doesn't have a worldview. So I think rather than just like talking shit in the text chat like a little boy, why don't you speak up, Helios, and like engage with Detroyer?
Yeah, I mean, I assumed if we would have been able to get past this point that we would have started discussing some of my views on the various categories that I brought up. But we couldn't get past this point because it was just, I mean, it was such absurd. Yeah. So
it's a point that's brought up quite a lot. I think Alex Mal, I'm not an atheist, but Alex Malpass has a very good article that goes over Detroyer's like basic objection, and there's also responses to that too. But yeah,
sure,
it's pretty interesting.
But, I mean, do you think that he even began to give some response? I mean,
no, I don't personally, but.
I mean, I shouldn't be asking a moderator.
Yeah, no, I'm just. I don't think it was really a debate, honestly, between like on either side. I think it was, but anyway, maybe explain what ad hocness is, because I'm confused. I was kind of confused by that like fundamental disagreement that you and him had about ad hoc being a fallacy or not a fallacy.
He was just using that as a way to escape. What are you talking about? That wasn't a fallacy. That was just like him thinking, "Oh, I've got to pull the parachute cord to get out of here."